Welcome to On the Fly College Edition, a podcast presented by Playfly Sports. I'm your host, Gene DeFilippo. Playfly Sports is the full-service marketing and media company bringing digitally enabled innovations to the sports industry. I'm your host, Gene DeFilippo, and our guest today is a very, very talented man. He is a terrific AD, he was a terrific assistant football coach, and Terry Mohajir will be a very, very interesting person to listen to today. So I'm glad that you're here. Terry, welcome.
On the Fly, Gene DeFilippo. How about that, man? His own podcast. I love it. I love it.
And I am so glad that you're on here. Terry, take a few minutes and talk to us about, when you went to Arkansas State, you played football. After you graduate, take us up to now, because you've had a really successful career.
Well, you're gonna think it's funny. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. It's great seeing you, as always. And we always don't spend enough time with you when I see you at some of these conventions and stuff. So thanks for having me on and taking an interest. I'm probably one of the only sitting ADs. You were one as well that played Division I football, coached was Division I FBS, I guess now, and then sitting AD. So I think I owe a lot to my background, to be very candid with you. And after I got through, I've always kind of taken the road less traveled, so to speak. I wasn't a highly recruited guy out of high school. I'm from Kansas City area. Not very many people. I'm from the Kansas side. Not many people go to Kansas when in the 80s to recruit football players.
Right.
Maybe some basketball players, but not some football players. So I ended up going to a junior college first, Butler County. I'm sure you recruited Butler County Junior College in your days when you're a young coach.
Sure did.
And we had a good team, had a lot of good players there, and I wanted to get re-recruited. I was from a pretty big high school, and we platooned, and so I played running. I was a starting running back. I didn't think I was going to be playing running back in college, so I went to JUCO to play defensive back to get re-recruited. And so I did. I got some offers. Ended up at Arkansas State with Larry Lacewell was the head coach. It later became Jerry Jones' director of personnel for 25 years, won all the Super Bowls. They haven't won a Super Bowl since he's left. And then after there, I got through playing a ball, and I never got redshirted. I had a year left of school, and I wanted to get an internship. And Ray Perkins, remember Ray Perkins?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Ray Perkins was the head football coach at Arkansas State for 1 year. And I worked.
I did not know that. And I'm really up on all this.
After he left the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he came to Arkansas State as a head coach and talked me into working for him for a year. And he was, obviously national guy, was the head. People that don't know who Ray Perkins is, he was the head coach of the New York Giants that drafted Lawrence Taylor. Pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
So, Bill Parcells took his place when he left. When he went back to Alabama, Bill Parcells took his place at the Giants. Anyway, so I got the chance to work with him, and he kind of got me interested in coaching, made some calls for me, made some calls to some GMs about interviewing. And back then they didn't have computers. So I went to the computer lab, sent about 70 resumes out to all the coaches around the country. And I happened to get some correspondence back from the University of Kansas, and I became a GA. And at that time, the NCAA was creating these quality control. So they'll call them analysts now. Well, I was one of the first analysts permitted by NCAA purposes. And they called them quality controls then. And so I went there. I did we did a lot of the scouting, a lot of the prep work. And then I moved on to the field, assistant offensive line, game day specialties, coach. And then I decided I wanted to get into administration. And Bob Frederick, you remember Bob Frederick was the AD.
Very successful AD at Kansas.
Yeah, Kansas. And then I ended up, my first administrative job was University of Kansas. Worked there for a couple of years, and then ex-football coach used to be the AD at West Virginia, Dick Martin. You may remember Dick Martin.
I remember Dick.
He was the head of the foundation of the school, University of Missouri Kansas State, UMKC. And he says, we're starting a Division I program from scratch, taking it from NEI Division I. And do you have any interest? I said, I'm from Kansas City, wouldn't mind living there. My girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife, was working for an advertising agency. And I went to go work there. It was the best thing I ever did because it taught me how to do everything. Fundraising, working with politicians, municipal governments, all that kind of stuff. And so we basically went from NEI Division I, and that was I was part of that, the tail end of that, and it was a great experience. Was there for a little while, then I went to, I said, it's probably time I need to go back to a football school. We didn't have football, and FAU, Florida Atlantic University, was starting a program, and I was interested. They were looking for an external guy, fundraiser, and I applied and got a job working for Howard Schnellberger for 7 years. And so I worked for Howard, and the stadium project, I was an integral part of raising money, and I was a point person for fundraising for the foundation, FAU Foundation, to raise money. And we built the project and worked for Howard. Loved working for Howard. One of my favorite people in the whole time. I probably learned more from him than any other administrator I ever had or ever worked for. And one of the nicest compliments in my career was when he passed away, his family asked me to come speak at the funeral, which was amazing. I said, well, who else is speaking? They said, Joe Namath, Jim Burt, John. I was like, I'm not worthy. What are you talking about? But they wanted that. I couldn't do it because we were announcing that we're going to the Big 12 that day. So I ended up sending a video. And so the timing didn't work, but it was, and then I went back to the University of Kansas, senior associate AD, oversaw all external. And then I got the AD job at Arkansas State, where I played, have been, and then now UCF, have been an AD for almost a decade.
Wow. Let's talk about how you and I came up. We came up different than most all of the athletic directors today. Very, very few of them played football, coached football on the Division 1A level, and then became an AD. I know I'm prejudiced, but I think it was very, very beneficial for me. And I want to see if you agree with me, because it's hard to supervise coaches if you haven't been one. It's hard to know what the student athletes are going through if you haven't been one. So I thought that was a good way for me to come up. I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Terry.
I wouldn't have changed it at all. I actually, it's funny you say that. I often worry about our new generation of administrators and why we're in the predicament of where we're in today, because they didn't keep the main thing, and that's education, teaching, helping young people reach their potential so they could have outstanding career goals. If you weren't intimately involved with recruiting, helping young people, seeing all their issues, off the field, on the field, just the maturity levels. I mean, they're your resource. They're your management. You're managing. They're your workers, so to speak. They're your workers. They work their tail off their students, but they're human beings. And I think it allows you to have some compassion for what they do and what they go through. And then you got the other side of it from a student athlete side, and then you have the other side of the coaching of understanding the coaches' missions, because 95% of the coaches in our business, that are probably over the age of 45 or 50, got into it not because of what they're making money wise. I mean, it's because they wanted to help young people, and somebody impacted their life along the way as either a high school coach, college coach, or a pro coach, whatever. And they wanted to do the same and help young people that probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to get an education, but for their scholarship in whatever sport they're in. So I think that's really helped me. And like you, understand and put myself in the shoes that you keep the main thing, and that is student services. We often talk, Gene, a lot now about, and it pains me when I hear these young administrators saying it's about the student experience, the student experience. Oh, that's all BS. It's about student services. Okay. Student experience is about what you choose to have. We got 5,000 students in a transfer portal saying their experience sucks at their school. So you know what? It's about services. It's about providing the services and helping young people get to an end. And a person like me that finished my eligibility and the head coach pats you on the back and says, "Good luck in life, kid. Go get them." Understanding what helps shape your principles. Well, because of those, and because I wasn't prepared, because I had to send out 70 resumes, we created this program. It's 100% job placement and grad school placement program. We're the only school in America that does that guarantees jobs if you come to school here. And why is that important? It's because I was a student athlete, because I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared as a student athlete. I had one skill and I could tackle people, and my coach probably didn't think I did a very good job of that.
No, that's not true.
So you know what? I was, trying to help young people learn on the fly. And I think that core principle in our everyday life has been shaped by being a former student athlete and a coach. And if we don't challenge our own core principles every single day, they won't remain relevant. So we got to challenge our own core principles so they remain relevant. And that's why when I hear these young sports management, degree seeking people coming up in our business, I keep telling them that, listen, make sure that you have some core principles of why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that's why you see that we need to recalibrate what we're doing in our industry, or this is going to be, going to be a tough deal to reel back in.
It's really not sustainable.
No, it's not.
It's not. We need to find a way to pull in the reins a little bit, because it's not sustainable. Let's go back to Howard.
Yeah.
Howard was somebody that I always admired. And one of my best friends, Kurt Van Valkenburg, used to tell me all the time, "Chino, we got this young guy and he's helping us raise money for the stadium, and he's doing this and he's doing that." And Kurt and I played together at Springfield. We coached together at Vanderbilt. And he always used to talk about you. And he loved Howard. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Howard.
Well, first of all, Kurt Van Valkenburg was with him from, I think, Louisville and FAU and Oklahoma. He was with them in Oklahoma.
Right. And they were in Oklahoma for that year.
Kurt's one of the best guys in the world. He kind of was the guy that cleaned up everything. And Howard was a great visionary. And then Kurt was this great detailed guy, super guy, loved him. I had I learned a lot from Kurt too, really did, from Valkenburg. I had a lot of conversations. I learned a lot from the coaches, and I was very lucky to spend a lot of time. But I used to drive Howard up and down the coast fundraising, and he was, with his stature, I think he had like 11 restaurants named after him down there, and every place he went, he was recognizable, and he always treated people with a lot of respect. He meant what he said. He said what he meant. He had unbelievable vision of where he wanted to take a program. Not only that, he was an outstanding architect of a program. And maybe that's what's helped shape me as a young administrator. I worked for some of the best architects in the business. Glenn Mason was another one that I worked for. He was a fantastic, built programs. Howard built programs. Every place he went, he built.
And they'd love to have the record that Glenn Mason had out of Kansas.
Oh, I know.
What a job he did.
Yeah. And also what he did at Minnesota. And so these guys just really shaped, and just the level of detail in the way you treat people, the way you follow up. Howard, I would have to bring my coffee in every morning and sit next to his desk, and we would have to talk about, okay, what are you doing today? So, he was, even though he was the head coach, and I was paid by the foundation, and I felt like, hey, whatever. He was the guy that I took, and I really took a lot of direction from him, and I'd share ideas with him. He liked them. And I mean, just spending all the time. And he never, ever, like, even if you had like a function, maybe you had like a donor function and maybe, or, you had it up in West Palm and maybe 4 people showed up, he'd say, how much invitations did you send out? He'd always ask, and you'd tell him, he's like, that's best you could do. And he's like, Terry, as long as you tried, he was good because he knew I was a hustler. I think he knew that. If he didn't think I was a hustler, I don't think he would have had as much patience, but we were trying to build a program. And we used his stature to help with that. And we had a lot of functions after practices in his conference room. And he was amenable to do anything. And I was always kind of protective of him as far as taking him out of practice. Like if we had to go do a donor function up in Port St. Lucie or something. And I said, Coach, they want us there at 6:30. Your practice doesn't end. It takes us 45 minutes. He goes, don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. You just, I'll take care of practice. You tell me if I need to be someplace. And he was just so good, so gracious. And
let me say this.
Yeah.
The stadium that you guys built at FAU and starting that program from ground zero was one of the best jobs.
Yeah.
Really one of the best jobs in the last 30 or 40 years. I mean, where you took that institution from was just unbelievable.
Yeah, and we went to a bowl game. We were the fastest program in the history of the NCAA to go to a bowl game. And we beat Memphis in the New Orleans Bowl. And then we beat Central Michigan in the Motor City Bowl when Butch Jones was the head coach. And I ended up hiring him later at Arkansas State. But it's kind of irony. But yeah, no, Howard was he taught me about how to evaluate coaches. And part of how I hire coaches today is from the numerous conversations I had with Howard. And he also had another guy, Kurt Van Balkenburg as well, another guy by the name of Fred O'Connor, that you might know. Fred O'Connor. He was the AD at Catholic U and was at Villanova. He was the assistant coach at Villanova for a while when Howie Long was there, and was
yeah, I coached against him.
Yeah.
I was at Youngstown State when he was coaching at Villanova.
Yeah, he coached in the pros, and he's another guy that I spent a lot of time with, and helped me really put together profiles of coaches to help be successful. Or profiles I looked for to hire in order to be successful, and those guys.
Right. Let's stop for just a minute.
Yeah,
you have hired some of the best coaches in the country. I mean, you really have. First of all, tell us what you're looking for when you go hire a coach. And second, name some of the people that you've hired, because it's been unbelievable.
Well, of course, Gus Malzahn, of course, Brian Harsin, Blake Anderson, and Butch Jones was my last one before I came here. And we were losing coaches every year, and I think we had, they had Roberts, Hugh Freeze before I got there, Gus, Harsin, and Blake Anderson. So we had 5 coaches in 5 years. Never been done before in the history of the NCAA. And Steve Roberts was moved on. Hugh Freeze came in. He went to Ole Miss. Gus came in. He went to Auburn. Brian Harsin came in. He went back to Boise. And then Blake Anderson was there, and he was there for a while. So we had the coaches that I had while I was there. We won three conference championships in 4 years with 3 different coaches. I mean, that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't.
And so I think it has a lot to do with the profile that I look at. It doesn't mean, and everybody says, well, you have your list. Believe it or not, the list that I always had, I started with, I didn't end up hiring anybody on those lists, because I learned this from Mark D'Antonio when I was his GA, when we used to watch recruiting film, give everybody an honest day evaluation. And you know what? You owe it to yourself to give everybody's. And I gave every coach an honest day's evaluation that was interested in our job. And I would start looking deeper and deeper. And I'd watch film. I would watch their film. I would watch their chalk talks. I would watch how they handle media, their Twitter account. I mean, I could spend at least 8 hours on one candidate, just watching all the stuff on what they do.
All right. What did you look for?
I looked at how they communicate. Number one,
Person that you look for.
first time I talked to him on the phone, I looked at how do you communicate on the phone? Because what's from a recruiting standpoint, what's the first thing? What's usually the first contact you have?
With telephone.
Telephone, right? So my first contact on the phone, and by the way, there's some sitting FBS head coaches that I interviewed that weren't very good on the phone. That I moved on because maybe they were nervous, I don't know, but they just weren't really fluid. The other thing too is how you communicate, how you teach. Watching them on the board, and when you're explaining your offense, your defense, you chalk talk. How do you teach? Listen, I've been hiring basketball coaches too, and I put them on the board. Not that I know a lot about basketball, but if they tell me to teach me their defense, their full court pressure defense. How simple is it? Is it easy to learn? And I think that's really important because you can have a great athlete, but may not be a good learner. And I have dyslexia, so I know it's tough for me. So I want to, if I can learn it and I can pick it up, that means anybody can pick it up and learn. And it's not always about how great of an athlete you are. It's about how fast you can learn, right? People always say, you remember the coaches that you say, don't think, just react. Well, you have to think to react, right? Sure. That's a bad coaching. So in order to do that, you have to rep it, but you have to teach it well. So those are another thing. I like to hire coaches that are at different levels, that coached at different levels, high school, junior college, lower Division I or Division II, that have won at every level. And then I have like about 5 or 6 other elements that I look at that, and the other thing too is I'm a little careful because I started, when I was doing all these searches, I had other ADs call me and I recommended one. And because I interviewed him, I really liked him. I didn't have a hire, but I said, I was on the fence. It could have gone either way. And they ended up hiring that person and they won the conference. And so I'm a little hesitant about I'm a little smarter now that I don't necessarily give all the elements and the profiles away, just because I think it can be a competitive. It's more analytic stuff on schemes, and so I'm a little more guarded about that now. So
that's great.
Yeah,
Terry, as you were coming up,
yeah.
What advice would you give to a young Terry Mohajir on his way up?
Well, I hear that a lot. I have these young individuals, men and women, that they always say, I said, well, what do you want to do? They said, well, I want to do what you do. I said, you want to do what I do? I said, you willing to do what I did to do what I do? They're like, I'm like, what? They're like, what? I said, if you want to do what I do, you have to do what I did in order to do what I do. Are you willing to move your family 5 times? Are you willing to go take jobs that may not be that attractive to get better at your craft? Are you willing? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. I'm not sure I want to do that. I don't think I want to move my family 5 times. I'm not sure I want to do that. I said, well, you just said, are you willing? You want to do what I do? But if you want to do what I do, you got to do what I did. So I think that's what I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, Gene.
No, it does. It does, because I went through the same thing. Yeah. My son, John, was 8 years old. He'd already lived in 4 different states.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not bragging about that.
No, it's not.
That's nothing to brag about.
Not at all.
But what my wife went through, moving 2 and 3 children all the time and going and to a new place. I mean, that's hard.
And it, as you know, I say that not because we're bragging about it. It is to get to where we are and where you have been. You had to make moves, strategic moves for your career.
Right.
The best move I say this, that's one of the best moves. I left Kansas and went to UMKC. No football. So then I made another better move. I went to go work with Howard at FAU. But those were strategic. I mean, I brought my wife halfway around the country to Florida. We've never really been there. West Palm is like New York and the beach, So,
yeah.
So that it was a lot of transition. But I did it because I knew I could get better. a lot of young people these days, they graduate sports management degrees. They want to be senior associate ADs right out of college, but they don't want to get better at their craft. They just want to have the title because you know what? They're smart and they had a good GPA. But how do you get better? You got to be good at what you do as well. Well, in order to get good at what you do, you have to learn from different people.
Right.
And there's no real college for leadership, right? No one really teaches leadership. It's kind of a learned behavior. That goes back to our time as being former student athletes and coaches, right? You learn a little bit more about leadership, running your room, running special teams. You learn how to lead. You learn how to communicate. You learn how to look at people in the eyes. You learn how to have tough conversations with people. I think those are all things that you learn about, but a lot of young people don't necessarily want to have those conversations. They don't want to manage. They don't want to have tough conversations, but they still want to do what you do, but they don't want to have to do what you did in order to do what you do.
You know what, Terry, it's funny you mentioned that. You said going to Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, without football was a great thing. Well, I went to the University of South Carolina at Spartanburg.
Yeah.
NAIA, no football, and was there as athletic director for 2.5 years because I needed to learn. I had to be the business person. I had to be the fundraiser. I had to be the AD. But you only learn by being, by working at your trade.
That's right.
And so I understand that.
It's amazing, Gene, and you've been in the search business as well. You've probably interviewed or been a part of interviews or listened in on interviews, and when asked tough conversations, and they may look great in the resume, went to a wonderful school, went to a great grad school, have a great pedigree, but asked real life in the trenches conversations, they have a hard time answering, don't they? Have you ever had experience with that? Huh?
They sure do.
Yeah, and so I when I hire people now, I have most of the people that I've hired. My senior woman administrator, she was a Division I tennis coach and head of academics at school. She went from a Division I tennis coach and was the head of academics at 2 athletic departments. I'd say she was in the trenches, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
She's my senior deputy athletic director, Rich Zavosik. You may even know Rich. He was the youngest head coach at St. Francis in New York City. And he worked at St. Peter's, and he worked at American. He started North Florida's basketball program. He's a former basketball coach for 25 years. He was in the trenches. He played Division II basketball in the trenches. And so my deputy for fundraising, he was a coach and played baseball. And so I think you can see my trend is I've got to have people to understand our mission every day, but also understands how to get stuff done.
Right. And when you're coaching at a smaller level or being an administrator at a smaller level, you have to get things done. There's nobody to bail you out.
And I also caution people, that's exactly right. I also caution people as well when you're hiring people, excuse me, when you're hiring people, don't hire them based on how good their 18 to 22-year-olds are. Meaning, what I mean by that, just because they represent a really, really good brand doesn't mean they're very good at what they do.
That's right. Very well said.
Now, there's also a lot of people that are excellent ADs that also represent a great brand too. So, I mean, there's a lot of good Power 5 ADs and a lot of good that do fantastic work. And so, the guy I didn't know him very well, but I monitored him and I had spent time. The guy that I was always really impressed with was Tom Jurich. Watched him.
Yeah.
You were in the league with him. So, yeah, I was always just his trajectory, watched him. He was a former student athlete. I think he might have coached, maybe not, but took programs, Colorado State, Louisville, did a good job. Those guys were really good, and they always just kind of moved the needle.
There's a lot of people.
You are too. You're one of those guys too. You move the needle. I watched you when you're Villanova, and you move the needle. And I think those are really you can tell the guys that know how to get things done. But you're right. Going to South Carolina, Spartanburg probably helped you do that.
Oh, it did, without question. But getting back to Tom Jurich, there's a lot of people that want Tom to come back to Louisville as the AD.
He would be fantastic.
I've been reading that in the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was liked. I know. I mean, I don't really know the politics there, but my wife grew up there, and my father-in-law was the vice president there when Olson was the AD. And so we follow Louisville a lot, just because she grew up there. But yeah, no, he surely was a very strong AD. There's no question.
Terry, you've had a lot of successes in your career, a lot of successes. What are one or two things that you're most proud of that really excited you and gave you great pleasure?
I don't know if there's one individual. I think there's a lot of milestones at each institution. And every school was a little different based on the culture. At Arkansas State, being able to hire the coaches and continue the success was really a big deal. And building $90 million worth of facilities in a town that people just didn't think could happen. And we built SEC type facilities, SEC and Big 12 type facilities in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Butch Jones will tell you he's at Tennessee is better than what he had at Tennessee. And that was impressive. I mean, that was just, and then those facilities here, obviously, even though they had a head start and the bases were loaded, getting into the Big 12 was a big deal here. Building the football stadium, being able to build a football stadium from scratch at FAU that doesn't happen very often. That was monumental. But I'd say out of all the things that I do, the building the facilities, the hiring the coaches, all the championships, we had 22 conference championships at Arkansas State and 7 more than the next school. Is the life at the 100% job placement probably is the most monumental to me, because I know where these kids, and because you coached, where these kids are from Mississippi and the rural Arkansas, and their families didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. But for their education, they wouldn't have gone to college. And being able to see after they finish their careers, they don't make it to the NFL or the NBA, sending me a picture of their office in their new job, in their house, in their babies. What we just did was we broke the cycle. It's not about what you look like. It's not about where you come from. It's all about your economics. And you know what? We just broke the cycle. You know what the greatest thing about, I always talk about, so during all the social injustice stuff, I said the greatest thing about a locker room is the only discrimination that goes on in a locker room is who can't produce.
Right.
I don't care. I don't care where you're from, how poor you are, how much money. If you're from the country, you're from urban America, it doesn't matter. Can you help me get better? Can you help me get better?
Right. Can you help us win?
Can you help us win? So at the end of the day, when I see somebody send me a picture of their new house that I know, no way in hell out of high school could have bought that house. Their family couldn't buy that house. I get emotional. And that's when you have an opportunity to change people's lives for generations to come.
Wow. Whew, I knew you'd be good. Holy cow. Well, this has been great. Well, that wraps up today's podcast. I want to thank Terry Mohajir for joining us. He did a wonderful job, and you young administrators that are out there and some of the older administrators ought to listen to this, because he really, really makes some great points. We're out of time on this week's On the Fly College Edition. I'm your host, Gene DeFilippo. Thanks for your time this time, and we'll see you next time.